Hey, Mike here. I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Dark Poutine early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Well, the loons mean that it's time for some Dark Poutine. Welcome to this week's episode. I'm Mike Brown, and across the table from me is Matthew Stockton.
Hello.
How are you, Matthew Stockton?
It's a very October-y day, finally.
Finally, I kind of like October. I don't know what it is about this particular month. I think, well, Halloween is in it, but...
Yeah, but it hasn't been October-y. It's been sort of August-y.
August-y, yes, very much so. And we have a bit of an announcement. This week, we're participating in a multi-true crime podcast Halloween special called A Nightmare Before Halloween. There are 32 shows taking part. Many are friends of Dark Poutine, including Crime Lines, The Trail Went Cold, Once Upon a Crime, Criminology, True Crime Island, Asian Madness, Gone Cold, and many more. Even Nancy Grace is involved. The first part has been released in our Patreon feed. At the same time, this show became available, so you can listen to part 1 now. Part 2 will be released in the same place at midnight tonight. That's midnight Tuesday, October 25th, 2022. So you don't have to be a patron to listen, as the episodes will be in our public feed. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/darkpoutine and listen away. It's great stuff. A big thanks to Shane Waters of the Foul Play Crime Series podcast for putting this stellar content together. It's full of people we know. That's going to be our Halloween special for this.
That's great.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. So,
on with the show.
On with this show.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during the Dark Poutine podcast are solely those of the producer and do not necessarily represent those of Curious Cast, its affiliate, Global News, nor their parent company, Chorus Entertainment.
Dark Poutine is not for the faint of heart or squeamish. Our content is often intense and some listeners may find it disturbing. We are not experts on the topics we present, nor are we journalists. We are ordinary Canadian schmucks chatting about crime and the dark side of history. Let's get to it. Put on your toque, grab yourself a double-double and a Nanaimo bar. It's time to scarf down some Dark Poutine.
You are responsible for obtaining and maintaining at your own cost all equipment needed to listen to Dark Poutine. Dark Poutine can be addictive. Side effects may include, but not be limited to, pausing and questioning the system, elevated heart rate, pondering humanity, odd looks from colleagues as you laugh out loud at work, family members not into true crime worrying about you. Positive side effects may include some perspectives and opinions that you disagree with, as well as some wokeness and empathy. If you don't think Dark Poutine is for you, consult your doctor immediately.
On March 3, 2005, a contingent of RCMP constables attended the property of James Michael Roszko, 46, in Rochfort Bridge, near Mayerthorpe, Alberta. The members were there to serve a search warrant for stolen property and a marijuana growing operation on the farm, discovered the day before. Roszko, knowing the police would be arriving soon, armed himself with the help of a couple of friends, Shawn Hennessey and Dennis Cheeseman, and then he lay in wait for the RCMP. When 4 of the officers, Anthony Gordon, Lionide Leo Johnston, Brock Myrol, and Peter Schiemann, walked into a quonset hut on the farm, Roszko, hidden inside the building, opened fire on the 4 members, killing them, and then himself, before the other RCMP officers on site could come to their aid. This episode covers the life of the murderer and leads up to the slaying of the 4 RCMP members. Next week, in Part 2, you'll hear about the crime and its aftermath. You are listening to Dark Poutine Episode 241, Fallen 4, The Mayerthorpe Tragedy, Part 1, Offender History. Thanks to his long and violent past and a history of run-ins with the police, a long-time resident in the Mayerthorpe, Alberta area, James Michael Roszko had a bad reputation. People in town knew not to cross him. He was a bully. Cops were wary of him. He was slippery, too. Roszko had many arrests and prosecutions. However, only a handful ended in convictions. Included in that small number were the ongoing sexual assaults of a boy. Many court cases against him ended in either acquittal or a stay of proceedings. According to CBC News, quote, in total, Roszko was charged with 36 crimes, including driving and trespassing offenses, and convicted of 12 of them. At the time of his death, he was facing 2 charges of mischief to property, end quote. In the years leading up to the murders, Roszko was known to have hated cops and blamed all his troubles on the RCMP, claiming they were out to get him. He was volatile, known for his vicious temper, waving guns around, and sicking his dogs on trespassers on his property. Many, including Roszko's father, said later that they knew it was just a matter of time before James Roszko killed someone, and it wouldn't be a surprise if they heard that person he'd killed was a cop.
It's amazing how when you are committing a lot of crime, you think the police are always out to get you.
Yeah, isn't that funny? They are out to get you because you're committing a lot of crime.
It's insanity.
Yeah, it's funny how that works.
The police are out to get me. You've committed multiple crimes.
Yeah. There is no there's no question they're out to get you because they are. Yes,
because they're doing their job.
Mm-hmm. Growing up, James Roszko's family life was unstable. His mother left the family home when James was 12, leaving his father Bill to raise their 8 children on his own. James' issues with booze and drugs started in his teens. His dad confronted 14-year-old James having found weed in the youngster's room. He was running with a rough crowd who skipped school and got into all kinds of teenage trouble. Roszko made money on the side by making moonshine before moving on to dealing other substances. When Roszko was just about 17, on February 18, 1976, he was arrested and charged with 2 counts of break, enter, and theft. He was convicted on 1 count of break, enter, and theft and on 1 count of possession of stolen property. Roszko was fined $150 on each charge and received a 1-year probation order. The consequences were typical for a first offense. That same year, in November, James was charged with theft under $200. He was again convicted and this time fined $250. It isn't clear whether there were any consequences that came as part of a clear breach in his probation. More charges came 2 years later. He was again charged with 1 count of possession of stolen property and a further count of break, enter, and theft. Roszko's criminal sophistication was developing. On April 28, 1977, Roszko had driven an accomplice who then broke into a gun store in Mayerthorpe. Roszko got $40 of the proceeds of the sale of the items stolen for being the wheelman. James pled guilty to possession of stolen property and was acquitted on the break and enter charge as he hadn't entered the business. James was given a suspended sentence and a probation order of another 18 months. Roszko didn't stick to theft. He was charged and convicted of 1 count of making harassing phone calls in April of 1979. James earned his first jail time and was sentenced to 30 days behind bars on that charge. As he was on probation at the time, he received 15 days jail time to be served consecutively with the harassment sentence. He was not above lying to the court. Roszko appeared in Mayerthorpe Provincial Court on May 6, 1980 at a friend's scheduled impaired driving charge trial. He told the court that his friend was out of town and asked the trial to be adjourned. This friend was alleged to be in town on the day of the trial. He's alleged to have acted as an agent for his friend who gave him no such instructions. According to the Crown Counsel case report, Roszko was acquitted at trial because the Crown couldn't establish whether he had the intent to obstruct justice. So, let's get this straight. He's in court for some matter and says, well, his friend is out of town, so that's why he hasn't shown up. But the friend is in town, but they can't prove whether or not he's lying for the friend.
Yeah, and we're going to see a lot of this sort of behavior, aren't we?
Yes.
So, Mike, you've done a lot of episodes.
Yeah.
So this amount of criminality, we've gone through a lot of criminality at a young age here.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't bode well for the adult Roszko.
No.
Did you grow up with any real hellions?
Yes,
who were, but ones that are all like the really bad ones,
Yeah.
always getting arrested? And did they make it out, or did they become adult criminals as well?
Well, a few of the guys who I hung around with ended up doing some really bad stuff, destroying the golf course at one point.
Right.
And they went to jail for 2 years less a day. And I think they were like 18 or 19 at the time. I'm not going to say any names. But they were always kind of the hellion guys around. Out of the 3 of them who went to jail for that, I think all of them have kind of stayed away from crime after that.
Okay.
So even though they were real hellions before,
Yeah.
there wasn't much more after that. So it's like they did their bit and it straightened them out, kind of thing.
There's a difference between stupid youth stuff
Yeah.
and criminality that's just almost in the bone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, yeah, those guys aren't terrible people. One of them went on to be sort of one of the grandfathers of metal in Halifax. So,
Okay.
yeah, it's kind of an interesting...
Music saved his life.
Yeah, kind of it did.
You know?
It was a place for him to channel his rage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Death metal.
Obviously, there are exceptions, and this guy, James Roszko, seems to be one of them. There's something different about him and the way he was doing things very early on that just, like you said, doesn't bode well for his future.
No.
And it carries on. As an adult, James Roszko worked in the oil patch as a driller on oil well rigs. It was a lucrative gig, and he eventually bought some land and tried raising cattle. But although he'd grown up physically, James Roszko's criminal pursuits continued and seemed to be escalating. On December 5th, 1990, after a trial, Roszko was convicted of 1 count of uttering threats to cause death or serious bodily harm and fined $200. On March 3rd, 1993, Roszko pled guilty to 2 traffic violation tickets and to a violation ticket for failing to wear a seatbelt on October 18, 1992. He was fined $25 for each. Now that sounds pretty straightforward. However, Roszko's interactions with police during the traffic stop were not that of a compliant person. He was charged with causing a disturbance by use of obscene language after swearing at the officers, claiming he was going home to tend to a pregnant cow where birth of the calf was imminent. When the Crown provided no evidence on the cause disturbance charge, Roszko was acquitted. After an incident on September 28, 1993, Roszko was charged with a single count of assault after allegedly assaulting a friend who court documents referred to by only the first name, Arthur. Roszko had pulled up beside a friend's car as he was allegedly upset with Arthur, who was sitting in the rear passenger seat. Arthur, apparently, had been spreading rumors around town about Roszko's homosexuality. Witnesses, including a man named Duncan and Arthur, told police that Roszko walked up to the passenger side of this car without warning, hit Arthur hard in the face with either a punch or a slap. Due to confusion with witnesses, subpoena dates, and Arthur not attending court, the Crown had no choice but to stay the charges against Roszko. Also related to the incident with Arthur, Roszko had been charged with 1 count of impersonating a peace officer. Someone had called Roszko to have words with him about allegedly hitting Arthur. When the person hung up without giving their name, Roszko called the phone company, claiming to be an RCMP officer to get a trace on the call. Again, the witness who was set to identify Roszko as the caller to the phone company did not show up for court. James was subsequently acquitted. A person named in court documents as Bradley came forward to the RCMP with a complaint that from the end of May into the beginning of December 1993, he'd been witness to a number of crimes allegedly committed by Roszko. From the report on James Michael Roszko's prosecution history as prepared by Gordon K. Wong, QC, on September 23, 2005, quote, Bradley considered himself a close friend to Roszko in May of 1993. He became acquainted with Roszko by first working at Roszko's farm. Bradley told police that between May 24, 1993 and May 29, 1993, he accompanied Roszko on a trip to the United States. They were denied entry at the border crossing because of Roszko's criminal record. Roszko crossed the border illegally and traveled to Utah where he purchased a Beretta 9mm handgun. They returned to Canada by the same route. During the trip back near Drayton Valley, Roszko repeatedly asked to see Bradley's penis. When he refused, Roszko pulled out the 9mm handgun, loaded and cocked the gun, and pointed it at Bradley's head. This continued for some time until Roszko was pulled over for speeding. At that time, he hid the handgun from the view of the police officer. Bradley said nothing to the police about what had just happened. Bradley reported that Roszko again pointed a firearm at him in early July 1993. Bradley testified at the preliminary inquiry that Roszko offered explanations for his conduct in May that resulted in Bradley seeing Roszko again. On July 12, 1993, Roszko went to Bradley's home and, without warning, pulled out the same handgun. Roszko threw Bradley onto a bed, held him down, and pointed the gun at his head. Roszko allegedly said that he, quote, had a job to do, which was interpreted by Bradley to mean that Roszko was going to kill him. A friend of Bradley arrived at the home, and Roszko was interrupted in whatever he was planning. When this friend left the home, the two wrestled, which resulted in Bradley getting a knife and stabbing Roszko in the jaw. Bradley took Roszko to the hospital. This is not reported at the time to police or to his friend that had attended the home. Again, according to Bradley, Roszko explained away his conduct to his satisfaction. In early October 1993, Bradley reported that Roszko offered him $10,000 to kill a man named Conrad. This happened while Bradley was helping Roszko put a replacement bumper on Roszko's truck. Roszko told Bradley that Conrad was the main cause of Roszko's problems in life. All Bradley could say was that there was a hostility between Roszko and Conrad. This offer was brought up 2 further times. In these conversations, Bradley indicated that Roszko suggested using a rifle owned by Roszko and that Roszko could be Bradley's alibi. Bradley refused these offers. After these talks, Bradley testified that he saw little of Roszko during the month of November. On December 1, 1993, there was what appeared to be a chance meeting between the two in Whitecourt. Roszko persisted in wanting to speak to Bradley, who did not want this. After lengthy persuasion, Bradley agreed to visit Roszko's farm to inspect a vehicle, so long as Bradley's friend followed in another vehicle. Roszko drove Bradley to his farm and on the way managed to lose the friend who was following. At the farm, Roszko drove to a field, purportedly to check on his cattle. He returned with a shotgun and produced a set of handcuffs that Bradley was told to put on. Bradley complied only because Roszko loaded and worked the action on the shotgun in front of Bradley. Roszko was angry over Bradley avoiding him over the past month. He questioned Bradley as to what he was telling people or the police about Roszko and their relationship. Roszko hit Bradley when he denied saying anything about their relationship. According to Bradley, Roszko released him from the handcuffs after a few hours so they could have a, quote, fair fight. After the fight, the two went to Roszko's house, where Roszko said he still did not trust Bradley and, quote, needed something to keep him from talking. Roszko decided to take pictures of a sexual nature of the two of them that Roszko would have to hold over Bradley to prevent him from talking. Some of these pictures were of Bradley alone, others were of the two together, where a camera timer was used. This night ended with Bradley performing oral sex on Roszko. Bradley testified that he agreed to the photographs and the oral sex, end quote.
So you started that section saying the RCMP were treating him as a, quote, friend.
Yeah.
Who'd been, quote, a witness to a number of crimes.
Correct.
But this is an abusive relationship.
Yes, it is.
He wasn't a witness. Mm-hmm. So, okay, let me do this. Let's pretend Bradley's name was Susan,
mm-hmm.
and he was a she.
Right.
And listen to how this, for some people, how it reframes this, right?
Sure.
Roszko was angry over Susan avoiding him over the past month. He questioned Susan as to what she was telling people or the police about Roszko and their relationship. Roszko hit Susan when she denied saying anything about the relationship. Roszko decided to take pictures of the sexual nature of the two of them that Roszko would have to hold over Susan to prevent her from talking. Some of these pictures were of Susan alone, others were of the two together where the camera timer was used. This night ended with Susan performing oral sex on Roszko. Susan testified that she agreed to the photographs and the oral sex. So just when I was reading this in advance a little bit of the show, I was, okay, this, like the way it's set up, I was like, okay, this friend saw him do some stuff, and I'm reading it. I'm like, no, this is an abusive relationship.
Mm-hmm. I think the way the RCMP treated it, it's because it's between two men. They didn't consider it a relationship.
Yeah.
Is that what you're driving at?
Yeah.
And I agree. That's the way it was treated. If you do replace the gender of the person,
it just reads extraordinarily differently.
Extraordinarily, yeah. Based on Bradley's complaint and subsequent investigation, James Roszko was charged with 7 criminal counts. 2 counts of pointing a firearm at Bradley, 1 count of counseling Bradley to commit murder, unlawful confinement of Bradley, possession of a weapon for purpose dangerous to the public peace, assaulting Bradley with a weapon, and breach of a condition of recognizance to have no contact with this person, Conrad. Gordon K. Wong's report continued, quote, Bradley testified at a preliminary inquiry that was conducted on June 27 to 29, 1994. The transcript is the only material available for review. At the end of the preliminary inquiry, Roszko was discharged on the counseling to commit murder charge. The judge found insufficient evidence to characterize what was said between the two as counseling. Roszko was also discharged on the breach of recognizance charge at the invitation of the Crown. The reason is unclear, as the Crown file is not available and very little was said at the preliminary inquiry. Either Conrad was not available as a witness or the charge was incorrectly worded. There is no information available to indicate what the facts of the alleged breach of recognizance were. Roszko was ordered to stand trial on the 2 pointing a firearm charges, the December 1, 1993 offenses involving Bradley, and an additional count of attempt to obstruct justice that occurred on December 2, 1993. The attempt to obstruct justice had to do with Roszko contacting a cousin to have him conceal the shotgun and film of what he'd done to Bradley after his arrest. Gordon K. Wong's report says further, quote, the trial on these matters commenced on June 3, 1996, in Queen's Bench before a judge and jury. On June 4, 1996, the Crown sought a mistrial, or in the alternative, an adjournment, as Bradley did not attend court as anticipated. The circumstances surrounding Bradley's non-attendance at trial are described below. In the week before trial, Crown was advised that Bradley had gone to British Columbia and was not coming back for the trial. The Crown made an application in Queen's Bench to get a witness warrant, and his whereabouts for the week before the trial was known. Bradley was arrested and transported to Edmonton Remand Centre the weekend before the trial commenced. The Crown prosecutor's recollection is that he met with Bradley at the Remand Centre before court commenced on June 3, 1996. Bradley convinced the Crown that the information police provided was a misunderstanding and that he was prepared to testify. As a result, the Crown agreed to have the trial judge release Bradley. He advised Bradley who to contact in order to secure a hotel for the night. The trial commenced with the other witnesses on June 3rd, with Bradley scheduled to testify the next day. Bradley did not attend and had not phoned to get overnight accommodations. The trial judge refused the Crown's request for a mistrial and adjournment on June 4, 1996. The trial judge cited Bradley's failure to attend court for his own charges and the lack of certainty that Bradley could be located in a timely fashion to allow the trial to continue. The Crown had no choice but to call no further evidence, resulting in the trial judge directing an acquittal on all counts. The Crown initiated an appeal from the trial judge's decision not to grant a mistrial or adjournment. Ultimately, that appeal was abandoned on September 4, 1996, as a service of the notice of appeal was not completed within the 30-day time period. So the whole matter was dropped. As well, by late August 1996, Bradley was still nowhere to be found, with warrants outstanding in BC and Alberta. End quote. Had Roszko been convicted on these counts, he'd have been looking at some serious prison time. However, once again, James Roszko had slithered out of trouble. More after a quick break. And we are back. Matthew, what are your thoughts so far on this guy?
Bradley was in fear and fleeing,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
And I think, going back to our early conversation, if he had been treated like a victim that he was of a violent relationship, they probably would have got a lot further with him testifying.
Sure.
Because he probably had no support that way at all.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of situations like this, people flee. They're fleeing a partner. Right?
Yeah, they're scared.
They're scared. And so I think that was probably mishandled. And maybe at the time, he didn't even, perhaps he didn't want them to see it like a relationship as well. There could have been a little bit of shame there or something.
Yeah.
So far, we've established that this Roszko person is a total cretin.
Yeah.
And I think there is still a lot more that he's going to be getting into.
Sure, yep.
Yeah.
And we're about to hear a lot more. The timeline jumps around a bit because Roszko was committing crimes while he was awaiting trial on other things. So if the dates seem screwy, that's why. Roszko's next conviction, coming in 1994, was for the relatively innocuous offense of speeding. But it was Roszko's reaction or overreaction to the ticket that makes it relevant to the story. Over 2 years, from March 1994 until October of 1996, Roszko tied up court resources fighting the speeding ticket over several appearances. He was convicted, appealed, and convicted a second time. Roszko hated cops and the system so much he'd do anything he could to rock the boat. Also in March of 1994, Roszko was facing 2 counts of obstructing justice and a breach of a condition of recognizance. James Roszko was not supposed to have any contact with Arthur, the man he'd allegedly assaulted in the car, or with one of the witnesses, Duncan. Both Duncan and Arthur had gone with friends to party at Roszko's place while the court proceedings were pending, and the trio were to have no contact. Roszko hadn't asked them to leave, even knowing they shouldn't be there.
So why would Arthur and Duncan even want to hang out with him at this point? So I don't understand that part. He's been a total dick to these guys. He's assaulted one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Why are they hanging out with him? He's no friend.
This is the nature of a very small town. There is nowhere else. If you want to party with your buddies, you're going to the party at the place where the guy lives who you're not friendly with.
Mm.
It's just kind of the way it goes.
Well, thank God I'm metropolitan.
Right. But yeah, I remember this kind of stuff from back home many, many times. It's not like, I know when we were talking before, you said, well, if that happened to me in Vancouver, I would just walk away and never see the person again.
Yeah.
You don't really have that option if you live in a really, really tiny town. You just don't. You're going to see that person. They're going to be in your face. You have to deal with them.
Well, I lived in a small town, but I guess I was close enough to London, which is
sure
big enough that you could just, no, I'm going to hang out with
get
other
lost.
people.
Yeah. But yeah, Bridgewater and area is not like that. Yeah. RCMP were also aware that Roszko had allegedly tried to manipulate Arthur and Duncan to have the charges against him dropped. From the report on James Michael Roszko's prosecution history, quote, "The attempt to obstruct justice charges related to each of these individuals. The charge involving Arthur alleged that Roszko offered to pay Arthur for his broken glasses so that Arthur would seek to have the assault charge withdrawn. The charge involving Duncan alleged that Roszko told Duncan not to speak to the police about being in contact with him and offered him a bribe so that Duncan would retract statements he had made to police about Roszko committing an offense. A preliminary inquiry was held on the 22nd of September, 1994. Roszko was ordered to stand trial on the breach of recognizance charge, but discharged on the 2 attempt to obstruct justice counts. The judge at the preliminary inquiry indicated that the evidence was insufficient on those 2 charges to warrant an order to stand trial. In reviewing the transcript, Arthur was ambiguous as to why Roszko paid him $200, in that it was either to facilitate a withdrawal of the assault charge or because Roszko was simply acknowledging his liability for breaking the glasses. There was no evidence given of a bribe to Duncan, and all that was said to Duncan was that he shouldn't tell anyone about being on Roszko's property. The trial of the breach of recognizance was scheduled for June 26, 1995. The transcript reveals that only 2 witnesses out of the 6 attended. Duncan and a corroborating witness attended court. 2 important witnesses, including Arthur, had been served but did not attend. The trial judge did not grant an adjournment request, stating as part of his reasons that the nature of the breach was not serious. This was a case where Arthur and Duncan voluntarily attended at Roszko's premises, and the Crown's case was based on Roszko not ordering them off his property. There were no threats or intimidation of the 2 alleged during the contact. The Crown elected not to call evidence, as the seriousness of the allegations without the missing witnesses was greatly diminished. End quote. So, yet again, another example of things going in Roszko's favor, allowing him to avoid convictions and more jail time. However, in the meantime, while things were being worked out in regard to Arthur and Duncan, another, even more serious matter was before the courts. A boy named Edward had come forward to Mayerthorpe RCMP in March of 1994. Edward said that starting in January 1983, just before he turned 11, James Michael Roszko, then 24, had sexually assaulted him for the first time. Edward said that over the next 6 years until December of 1989, Roszko had continued to sexually assault him over multiple occasions. Roszko was charged with 2 counts arising from this: sexual assault and sexual touching of a young person while being in a position of trust. It's not uncommon, as with Edward, for child sex abuse victims to remain quiet and not to report an incident until years after the assaults have ended. This occurs for a variety of reasons. Chief among them are self-blame for the assaults, shame, and fear of reprisal for facing their attackers. Many never speak up, so child sexual abuse is very much underreported. In fact, only about 38% of child victims disclose the fact that they have been sexually abused. There are also privacy issues surrounding cases of child sexual abuse. For instance, in Canada, media reports must not contain the name of the victim, therefore adding a layer of complexity to reporting that leaves the public in the dark about these crimes, thus creating a false belief that sexual child abuse is rare. The organization Darkness to Light, found online at d2l.org, is an organization that empowers adults to prevent, recognize, and react responsibly to child sexual abuse through awareness, education, and stigma reduction. Even though their statistics are from U.S. data, our 2 countries tend closely mirror each other in these stats. They claim that about 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday. About 1 in 7 girls and 1 in 25 boys will be sexually abused before they turn 18. Identified incidents of child sex abuse are declining, although there is no clear indication of a cause. The number of identified incidents of child sexual abuse decreased at least 47% from 1993 to 2005-2006. About 90% of children who are victims of sexual abuse know their abuser. Only 10% of sexually abused children are abused by a stranger. Edward's abuse had started with Roszko having Edward intimately touch him while he in turn touched Edward. After the first time, right away the assaults began to happen regularly. Edward said as frequently as once a week. Eventually, Roszko progressed to performing fellatio on the youngster and attempted to rape him anally, but could not, as Edward successfully fought off Roszko. Awaiting his trial for the sexual assault on Edward, Roszko was released on conditions to abide by a curfew, keep the peace, and be of good behavior, and not have any contact with Edward. Roszko could not leave well enough alone. In what was most likely an effort to intimidate Edward and deter him from testifying against him, Roszko confronted and allegedly assaulted Edward. It was on December 31st, 1994. Edward was at a local bar to ring in the new year. Roszko showed up. It was alleged that Roszko rarely went out to the local bars. However, he was there. Edward told police that Roszko and one of his buddies assaulted Edward, and that during the assault, Roszko used pepper spray on him. Police were called, and the pepper spray in the air inside the establishment forced people to leave the bar to avoid its effects. In addition to the already pending sexual assault charges for his behavior with Edward, now Roszko was facing another raft of charges: assault and possession of a prohibited weapon, possession of a weapon for a purpose dangerous to the public peace, causing a disturbance, and of course, breach of recognizance for contacting Edward. At his preliminary trial on those charges, it was determined that the majority of charges were excessive, as they were essentially for the same thing. It was determined that Roszko would only be tried on assault and possession of a prohibited weapon in this round. Again, struggling to get witnesses to show up to court was an issue, and these charges were stayed. Roszko's sexual assault trial was held beginning on September 28, 1995. Roszko was convicted of the sexual assaults on Edward. Roszko was also found guilty of the sexual touching, but the charge was conditionally stayed by the trial judge because of the legal principle preventing multiple convictions arising out of one set of facts. Roszko was sentenced to a 5-year jail term. Roszko appealed his conviction successfully in 1997, and a new trial was ordered. From the report on James Michael Roszko's prosecution history, quote, "The mistrial application had to do with the victim and one other Crown witness repeatedly adding gratuitous comments in their answers during testimony, straying into areas the trial judge had already ruled to be inadmissible. The Court of Appeal was of the view that the trial judge, if correct in dismissing the mistrial motion, did not cure the prejudice the testimony produced in his charge to the jury," end quote. So, once again, Roszko was retried. However, he was also convicted again, but his sentence was less. He was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison for the sexual assault, and the conditional stay was entered on the sexual touching charge for the same reasons as mentioned above. Again, from the report on James Michael Roszko's prosecution history. Quote, "Why the difference in sentencing between the two trials? In reviewing the sentencing transcript for the second trial, the Crown sought a 5 to 6 year sentence. The court found circumstances existed in the reporting of the offense and in the victim's conduct towards Roszko after the sexual acts had stopped, to conclude that the victim had not suffered long-term harm. The sentencing judge in the first trial made no such findings, nor did the defense argue it. So it was new evidence. No long-term harm. Let that sink in."
So he raped this kid when the kid was 11, essentially.
Yeah.
Right.
And they're probably saying, well, so he was friendly with Roszko, so there was no real long-term harm to him. There totally was.
That's just bullshit. Yeah, I mean, you can't... I'm sorry, but...
The guy that beat the crap out of me, he was found guilty of assault causing bodily harm. During the court proceeding, at the very end, I went and sat with his mom.
Right.
Because I have no beef with his mom.
Right.
But the court probably saw that, well, oh no, these two were friends. That kind of thing. And so he got probation rather than jail at that time. So it was me who made the mistake by going and sitting with his mom and being kind to her because I liked her.
Well, but she didn't do it to you.
Right.
Right.
But she was...
And this is, the kid, he was 11. Right?
Yeah.
That's when it started. And I'm sorry, but, getting however short term he got is way too short for doing that to a kid.
Well, I was 11 when that stuff happened to me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even near the degree of what this child went through.
And they don't understand what's in that kid's head.
No.
Right? Like, what they have to understand is psychologically, even if it doesn't look like it or not, that kid's going to be hurt.
Totally.
The good thing is this kid stood up to him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this kid eventually went to the police and said it happened. And so many of the adults in this story never showed up for trial.
Yeah.
But I think the bar scene with this kid is probably what Roszko did all along. I think he was essentially witness tampering all the time. People weren't just not showing up. I'm assuming.
Yeah, I know what you're assuming. You're assuming that he was
bullied people and
bullying
just
people.
not going to court.
But I think he had a reputation that preceded him as well.
So the perception was you'll get in trouble with him if you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay.
He's already gotten off a bunch of times. So
so they're like, well, if I went, I'll just raise his ire, and he always gets off anyway.
Right. So yeah, I think it was just people honestly being sane. But at the same time, there were all these opportunities
to stop him.
Back on the streets, Roszko returned to his law-breaking ways. In 1999, he was charged under the Federal Employment Insurance Act. It was alleged that James Roszko had applied for a second social insurance number under another name. The charge was laid on August 18, 1999. Trial was held on May 26, 2000. Roszko was acquitted on the basis that the Crown did not prove that he'd been the applicant on the second request for a social insurance number. The case for the Crown was based entirely on finding Roszko's fingerprint on the application form, but there was nothing else. In 2001, Roszko was charged with 5 offenses in response to another 1999 incident in which he shot and wounded one man and missed a second. There are different stories of why they were at his farm, either for a joyride or to warn Roszkos to stay away from their friend. Those charges were dismissed in 2003. His last criminal charge was in August of 2004 for mischief against property. Spike belts on his property had ruined the tires on vehicles of 2 provincial election enumerators. James Roszko didn't do anything by the book. This included not paying the bills. On March 2, 2005, 2 civil enforcement bailiffs went to James Roszko's Mayerthorpe farm. On March 2, 2005, 2 civil enforcement bailiffs went to James Roszko's Mayerthorpe farm. They were there to repossess a white 2005 Ford 350 truck. Roszko had failed to make his payments for some months and still owed $47,609 on the truck. Bailiff Robert Perry, a former police officer, had heard about Roszko's nasty reputation. He was aware of the elections numerators driving over Roszko's homemade spike belt. Thinking this might be a tough repo, Perry asked a second bailiff, Mr. Mark Natu, to go with him. The bailiffs arrived at Roszko's place, a 10 or 15-minute drive from Mayerthorpe at 3 in the afternoon. They saw who they assumed to be Roszko on the property as they pulled up to the steel gate across the driveway. As soon as they got out of their vehicle, Roszko's 2 nasty Rottweilers raced toward the bailiffs. Roszko had released them without a word to his visitors. The men quickly got back into their vehicle and Perry called the Mayerthorpe RCMP and let them know what was happening. According to the report on the Minister of Justice and Attorney General's Public Fatality Inquiry, quote, when he called the RCMP, he was advised by an unknown respondent at the Mayerthorpe detachment, quote, not to go on the property, you're at Jimmy Roszko's, stay off until we get there, end quote. The report continues. Perry and Natu continued to observe Roszko moving about the property, now driving a white Ford truck they believed might be the subject of their warrant. Finally, Roszko drove out of his fenced compound, shut the gate behind him, thrust his middle finger in the air, and yelled an obscenity. He got back into the truck and drove a short distance toward the bailiffs. He then suddenly accelerated, turned left, and proceeded north, still on his property and parallel to Range Road 75. When he reached the northeast corner of the fenced compound, he turned sharply left to the west and disappeared over a small hill. That was the last that was seen of him or the truck. Roszko had been gone from the scene for only a few minutes before the RCMP arrived. Corporal James Martin and Constable Peter Schiemann arrived in one police vehicle, and Constable Julie Littell arrived in a second cruiser shortly thereafter. They discussed the circumstances with the bailiffs, and Corporal Martin and Constable Cheeseman left the area to conduct a search for Roszko. 2 witnesses had seen a white truck exit rapidly from the field west of Roszko's property onto Range Road 80 and proceed north. They did not see who the driver was, and Martin and Cheeseman were unable to locate the vehicle. In the meantime, another officer, Corporal Jeff Whipple, had been in radio contact and met with Martin. Whipple agreed to continue a search further to the north and west of the property along Range Road 80, end quote. As the bailiffs were legally allowed on the property, and they were unsure that the truck Roszko had been driving was the one they were after, they forced the gate open. Corporal Martin, Constable Cheeseman, and Constable Littell cautiously walked onto the property with the bailiffs to search for the truck. The officers used pepper spray to fend off the dogs that were then successfully sequestered in a wooden shed near a large steel quonset hut on the property. Again, from the report to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General Public Fatality Inquiry. Quote, the large equipment door at the east of the quonset was closed and entry was made through the unlocked man door beside the larger door. Once inside the dark interior of the quonset hut, it soon became obvious that a, quote, chop shop and a cannabis marijuana grow were in operation. A significant amount of apparently stolen property, motor vehicles, a quad, a power generation system, and numerous parts, as well as the grow-op and associated equipment, were present in the quonset. It was apparent to the RCMP that they would require a search warrant in order to proceed further with criminal investigation and ultimately to the laying of criminal charges. The parties vacated the quonset after a cursory 10-minute search, end quote. As it was too late in the day, the search warrant would have to wait until the next morning. Roszko, however, suspected the cops were coming, and he began to plan what would become his final showdown with them. In our next episode, we'll hear about Roszko's cowardly ambush of the 4 RCMP members, his own death, and the aftermath of the crime, including convictions for the men who assisted him, Shawn Hennessey and Dennis Cheeseman. And that's it for Dark Poutine, episode 241, Fallen 4, The Mayerthorpe Tragedy, Part 1, Offender History. It's like there's this train.
Yeah.
This guy is a train that is coming for the police.
Yeah.
He's coming to a point where things aren't going to go well for everybody.
He needed to get slapped down a lot sooner.
Yeah. Yeah, like there were so many opportunities to deal with him.
And just almost every single time he completely walked scot-free or got a slap on the wrist.
It's really hard to watch. Like, I mean, obviously we're doing it from a point of hindsight.
Yeah.
And we see what's coming. You know, he's been charged how many times? Like 36 times and 12 convictions. And, you know, how frustrating was that to maybe police and the Crown Council and all that kind of stuff? Like, this guy just keeps getting off.
Yeah.
Did they just throw up their hands at some point?
Yeah. I guess a small town, did people just go, oh, you know, there's nothing we can do.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, this episode is kind of timely.
Yeah.
With the 2 police in Innisfil, Ontario that were recently killed.
Yes, and the one that was killed here in Burnaby just this past week.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that a little bit more in episode 2. Part 2.
Okay.
I was thinking more about Roszko. You know, what options did the Crown have? And one of them in the prosecution report that I read was that of dangerous offender consideration.
Right.
The problem with dangerous offender considerations is that the people have to be convicted of things before a dangerous offender consideration.
And he rarely got convicted.
Mm-hmm. So after his first conviction on the sexual assault, Roszko was flagged as a potential dangerous offender. So he was already flagged as a potential dangerous offender when he went on to do the things that he did. He was also identified as a dangerous offender on the basis that his sexual assault conviction was of a nature that it fit within the criteria for flagging. However, actually proceeding on a dangerous offender application against Roszko was never a possibility. The only time that an application could have been launched was at the time of his sexual assault conviction. At the time, there was no history of proven criminal conduct that would amount to a successful application.
The viewers can't, the listeners, like I said, the listeners can't see me just shaking my head right
no,
here.
No, because it's a podcast.
But I'm just shaking my head.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, okay, so...
But I get it, right?
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'd just be chucking people in willy-nilly,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
But the circumstances in this one he just managed to slip through it each time.
Yep. Well, let's move on to voicemail because holy crap.
'Cause we're just going to get upset.
Yep, I'm already upset.
That's right. It's time for voicemails. You can leave us a message at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you. Let's see who called us this week.
All right, here is our first voicemail. I'm looking forward to listening to what our listeners have to say this week.
Hey, Mike and Matt. Been listening to you guys for a little while now and love everything you guys do, but episode 10 has kind of stuck with me. I gotta say, it dredged up some stuff from my past that I never really dealt with. I've never talked about it with anyone, and you guys are the first people to hear about this. When I was 5 or 6, some things happened to me at the hands of a babysitter, and never really known how to deal with it. But listening to you, Mike, put everything out there has really helped me kind of come to terms with things. I really appreciate everything you guys are doing, and Mike, I really appreciate you putting yourself out there, and it makes me feel like I'm not alone, knowing that I'm not the only one that's gone through this. Kind of helps me understand myself a little bit better because I buried that in my past, and I didn't think about it for 20 some odd years until I listened to episode 10. I'm not in my vehicle today, so there's no sirens to be played at the end of the call. But go take a shit in your hat and have a good rest of your day, fellas. I appreciate everything you're doing.
Wow. Holy crow. I feel a whole bunch of things. I feel sad, and I feel grateful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whew.
But
Wow.
thanks for calling.
Yeah.
Because that that gave us, that both hit us here, sitting here listening to that.
Yeah. I don't even know how to respond except thank you for your voicemail and for the courage to talk to us about it, and to yeah, we really appreciate that, and I hope that maybe you reach out and get some help to talk about it with somebody else, because I know talking about it has really helped me. So please do that. Whew.
Wow. I got a little bit teary.
Yeah.
I'm such a pussy, Mike.
No, you're not. You're a human being.
I actually have feelings.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to our second voicemail. Hopefully this one doesn't make us cry.
Good evening, you two fine gentlemen, all the way from Slave Lake, Alberta. I just wanted to phone and let you guys know that you're doing a great job with all your episodes. Really informative, the last one about the internment camps. That was really interesting, especially how many there were around Canada and in BC. I do have maybe one possible episode for you, Mike. It happened back in 1986 up here when the fires went through the town. There was a young boy about 6 years old that was playing outside, and he ended up disappearing during the fire. Their parents never found the boy again, and he has been lost since that day. I can't remember the boy's name now. It escapes me, but I know his mom has since moved away from the area, but she still is looking for him. It was in the papers, so it shouldn't be too hard to find, but I thought maybe that might be an episode that might bring it to attention. Maybe somebody will remember him. But other than that, yeah, you guys are doing a great job. Keep it up. Very educational, informative, as well as a little lighthearted humor thrown in there with some of these tragedies that happen across Canada. But I thought that I'd give you a shout again, a long-time listener, and Chris is my name. If I forgot to throw that in there, but go take a shit in your hat. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Well, thank you for calling from Slave Lake, and of course, it was another sad one, another like a little boy going missing. I just am thinking, oh, that poor mom.
I was ready to make up a name for him because he didn't say it, but he chucked it in at the end.
Yeah, thank goodness. But yeah, that's a good story. There are a lot.
Have you heard of that one before?
No, I haven't heard of that one before, but there are a lot of different stories like that across Canada where somebody goes missing and they're never seen or heard from again. We covered a couple of them, but there's so little information. It's hard to do a full episode about one story. There's so little out there. It's
when people just go missing.
When they just go missing.
That's the point. They've just gone missing. Right?
Yeah. It's so. I wish we could do more. I've been thinking about a way to do it, and in my mind, we would have to do one episode with multiple stories. So we would do as much as we can on each episode or on each story, and have all the information, all the contact information in the show notes.
That could be a useful show, actually.
Yeah. So maybe we'll start to do more of those. We got a compliment from somebody calling us ethical true crime the other day, which is kind of nice.
Okay.
That we don't glorify the criminal.
Right.
In ways we don't dramatize, we don't play it up. I mean, I think as a writer, I've grown over the past 5 years.
Has it been 5 years?
It's been 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. In a way that what I understand about true crime today is a lot different than I understood when the show first started. And I'm sure people can hear our growth as a show throughout listening. So if you go back and listen to earlier shows, maybe the feel of it will be a little different than it has now become. But that's because I think spiritually and emotionally, mentally, I'm growing around true crime and what this actually means, what we're actually doing here. What should we be doing with this type of storytelling? Yeah. So anyway, that was a long tangent.
No, well, it's, even for me, Mike, and I've said this before, when you start, the first time I noticed it was when I wrote an episode, because you realize these are humans. And then when we're doing a show recommended by somebody like Colin, and who's Colin and his mom, and it was, her mother and his grandmother, and you realize you're trying to do well by these people. You're trying to help, right, and tell the story. Yeah.
Whew. Well, that's it for voicemails.
We need some funny ones next week, guys.
Yeah. Call in with something. Please call in with something funny.
But if you have something serious, that's okay.
Yeah.
As well,
true. Any voicemail is really welcome, unless you're going to be a critical bumhole. But
those just don't get played.
Yeah, those don't get played.
The power of the button.
Yeah, and it's amazing. There's this thing called the delete bin that they go into.
You don't get very many at all, though, which is
no,
nice.
we don't. No, there's been one or two.
Yeah,
but yeah.
And we laugh, and then we delete.
Yeah, we delete, and you don't get played because it's not a democracy. It's a benign dictatorship.
Calling yourself benign?
Benign. I am pretty benign. I don't think I'm malignant.
You're malignant.
No, I'm not. That's it for this week's voicemails. Again, you can leave us one at 1-877-327-5786 or 1-877-DARK-PTN. We'd love to hear from you, even if it is just to say hi and to tell us to go shit in our hats. If you're stumped for what to chat with us about, a quick story is welcome. We have 2 patrons this week.
Oh, great.
2. And neither of them have a place to live that I'm aware of. So that would mean that Matthew is going to put on his investigation hat and let me know. I think it's because you're psychic that you come up with these.
Because I'm sidekick?
Your sidekick and your psychic?
I'm both. I'm the psychic sidekick.
There you go. I'm kind of the sidekick in supernatural circumstances.
Yeah.
I kind of like that job.
Yeah, it's easier. I don't have all the responsibility, but I have all the fun.
Yeah, I do that on Alan Warren's show too. I'm just the sidekick and chime in every now and again. Yeah, it isn't a bad gig. It really isn't. All right. So first up, as far as patrons go, we have Danielle La Victoire Perot, and also known as Dan Victory. And I don't know where Dan Victory or Danielle La Victoire Perot lives.
I actually do.
Okay.
But I'm going to make up a fake one.
Okay.
So,
do you know this person?
Yes, she's from Monaco.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yes.
She's from Monaco.
Yeah.
Wow. And what does she do in Monaco besides do Princess Grace's hair?
She is actually, doing Princess Grace's hair right now probably wouldn't be a fun job.
Well, she probably does it. Somebody has to go into the crypt and make sure that everything. Oh God, that's
dark.
That got dark fast.
She's actually a professional Assassin's Creed player.
Really?
Yeah, she's like top level. Yeah. She makes all of her money just from doing that.
I've never been that good at a video game. Like, I've played a lot of video games. I have spent literal years of my life playing video games.
Dan Victory is the victor when it comes to Assassin's Creed.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I guess I should play some Assassin's Creed and get my arse handed to me by Dan Victory if there's multiplayer. I don't know if there even is in that game.
I don't know. I don't. I've only ever played SimCity.
There you go. I like SimCity a lot, but the most recent update really sucked, and they lost me there.
Well,
I like The Sims too.
I had a word with somebody who works for EA Games.
Oh, did you?
Had them over for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And said, "What's on with SimCity?"
Yeah.
And it's all about money, right? And I'm like, but I want to be able to create neighborhoods of specific architectural styles to the point where I can put flower boxes on specific windows.
Right.
So we agreed, even if I won like one of the big American lotteries, he still wouldn't do it for me.
Still would not do it. Okay. Well, there you go. Next we have Leanne Owen. Now, I don't know where Leanne is from, but I'm sure you do.
Leanne?
Mm-hmm.
Leanne is from Northern Ireland.
Northern Ireland? Oh, yeah. Well, there you go.
And she's from... Some people call it Derry. Some people call it Londonderry. But I'll just call it Derry. She's a Derry girl.
She's a Derry girl.
Yeah.
So, like, I've seen the show Derry Girls.
Yeah.
Which I quite like. It's really, really funny.
It's a fantastic show.
But also when I think of Derry, I think of Stephen King and It. Because that's where Stephen King's story It took place as well. So,
Is it
not
is
Northern
it in
Ireland.
Derry?
It's in Derry, which is one of Stephen King's mythical towns in Maine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, I couldn't remember it being in Derry.
No, it's not. So she's in Derry or Londonderry. She's a Derry girl.
Yeah.
And what does she do being a Derry girl in Derry?
She actually works over in a town nearby. You're going to laugh, but this is absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
There's a town called Letterkenny.
Oh, really?
Yes, not far from Derry.
Letterkenny is close to Derry.
Close to Derry, and she's a fishmonger there.
So do you like the show Letterkenny? Have you watched it?
I love Letterkenny.
See, I think Letterkenny is more geared toward people from rural Ontario.
Did I ever show you my birthday party invitation to the actors? Did like a video for me.
Really?
Yeah.
Like did you have a soft birthday
no,
party?
Just a friend knew them and got them to do it.
Oh, I didn't see
Oh,
that.
yeah. No, I had a super soft birthday party and they did the, hey, Matthew, they in character as well.
Really?
Yeah, I love Letterkenny.
Too bad you don't have that here. That we
Other
could
people
play
like
that.
the one that you guys like.
Trailer Park Boys.
Trailer Park Boys is a poor man's Letterkenny. There, I said it. We're going to have lots of people calling in about this.
But I love, Letterkenny, okay. Letterkenny would not exist without Trailer Park Boys. There, I said that.
Not true.
I think it is true. Anyway, we're moving on. And because, again, it's a benign dictatorship, there shall be no argument.
But thank you, both of you. Thank you both. The Assassin's Creed champion and the fishmonger.
Yes.
And that's a very noble profession, by the way, just so you know. Right?
Is fishmonger like fishwife?
No, somebody who sells fish.
You know what you've heard the term fishwife
Yes.
as a derogatory thing.
No, this is like she has a proper shop.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because fishwife is like somebody who's screamy and
No, she's not at all.
sort of
She owns this really
crass.
She has this really posh shop in Letterkenny.
That's nice.
Yep.
Letterkenny. And I do like the show. Okay.
Woo.
Thank you to our patrons.
Thank you both.
We don't have any donut money this week, so I'm on a diet anyway. Well,
Yeah.
I'm always on a diet.
I think if you want to call in and say you didn't like fishmonger, I'll change it next week. Okay. Are you always on a diet?
Well, I'm always kind of not. It's not a diet. It's like a way of life that I am trying not to be a pig anymore. So
Right.
I've lost 50 pounds and kept it off.
Right.
And I'm still slowly losing weight, not at the rapidity that I would like.
That's usually the way it happens.
Yeah, so I've sort of peaked after 50 pounds, which was that's a lot of weight to lose. So
It
I'm
is.
not saying that it's a bad thing, but I still have a lot more to go. But this past week, I thought, what's missing as far as what I'm doing? And I realized I wasn't eating a lot of vegetables or fruit. So I just started to add those things.
And exercise.
You
got to move.
I'm doing all of that. So fruit, vegetables, exercise, drink more water, pretty much.
Do you wear leg warmers when you walk and have little pink dumbbells?
I should.
And like do like the fast
like a
walking?
leotard. I should
and
have
the fast walking with your bum going.
I should have like a little leotard that I wear. I would look like I don't want to be mean to myself. I was going to say I would look like a big bag of cottage cheese walking down the road,
but cottage cheese moving in the right direction.
Help. Thanks to all our patrons and Donut Money donors, past and present, for your generosity. It helps to keep the show going. You can become a patron of Dark Poutine at patreon.com/darkpoutine. For a one-time donation, you can send us donut money via PayPal using our email address, darkpoutinepodcast@gmail.com. If you don't already subscribe to the show, it would mean a lot if you did. You can easily find Dark Poutine on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. If you haven't gotten yours yet, my book, Murder, Madness, and Mayhem, is available to order via a link on the Dark Poutine website. And speaking of darkpoutine.com, please check it out for show notes and other cool stuff. We'd appreciate it if you took the time to give Dark Poutine a like or a follow on Facebook and Instagram. Most importantly, thank you for listening, and tell your friends about us. Word of mouth is a powerful thing. All right, so we just had a really interesting discussion about dates that wasn't completely incorrect.
Actually, we were both right. We were just thinking in different ways. I was thinking of calendar week, and you were thinking week of episode.
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, next week we'll be back, and it will be, I guess, our 5th anniversary episode, and that will be the Mayerthorpe tragedy part 2. Yeah, so interesting. 5 years. Can't believe I've been doing this for 5 years. Maybe we'll do something a little special in November.
It's literally your 5-year anniversary.
Literally, yes.
On Halloween.
5 years, Halloween. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yep. And then the week after that will be the Remembrance Day episode, because that will be released on November 7th.
Okay.
Yeah. So we are doing something special for Remembrance Day this year. But
are you going to stay over on Christmas?
Am I supposed to?
Yeah.
Why?
You can come stay over on Christmas Eve.
But I have cats tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
I could just come over in the morning then.
Well, yeah, I might have.
I wanted to like sneak out and put stuff in the stocking and see you wake up and like unwrap gifts.
Well, you can have gifts for me to unwrap when I'm there.
Okay.
All right. Anyway.
Can I put you in like a little pajamas and then like you have to come out and pretend you just woke up?
A little onesie with the bum out?
No, thank you, Mike.
With the bum out?
No, thanks.
No, you don't want the...
No.
Okay, good.
Maybe if you're somebody else.
Ouch. Oh, ow. My heart. Anyway, that's it for this week. Don't forget to be a good egg and not a bad apple.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.